So, my name is Steve again, and I actually have two startup ideas that I'd like to see pursued. I'm really impressed with what I've heard here today. There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of excitement, and I can see some of these things actually making it out into the world, and that kind of puts a smile on my face. Some serious, some not, but I think they still could end up out in the world, and I've seen strange things be monetized over the past. I'm in a little bit of a different situation in that I actually don't need the funding to launch the startups. That puts me in a great position to take money from them if they want to provide it, and I'm doing this to be very, very serious. So I have some very specific business models to talk about. I'll try and keep it real short, and if you're interested, I think there's lots of involvement in a number of areas. The first one has to do with the ubiquitous status message that we find in Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and everywhere else. Louder? Or are you telling me to go to hell? I'm sorry, the finger was pointing the wrong way, sorry. Okay, so I'll try a little bit harder there. So, dealing with status messages, the Twitter made famous the 140 characters. There's been a lot of conversation about the idea of associating additional information with that status message. And it gets more interesting when you realize that those status messages may start in Twitter, but they end up all over the place, or vice versa. So what happens is any one of these services doesn't really control that status message. They're just a portion of the distribution vehicle. Now, embedded in that status message is a whole lot of information, and if this sounds familiar, I'll bring this home here in just a second. There's a whole lot of information that doesn't really show in that message, but is there nevertheless. And that includes geolocation, trends, forwarding, distribution, origination, tags, themes, concepts, people, events, contextual ad components, an awful lot of stuff. Now, I said that this sounds familiar because it does. There's been a very wide conversation about it. The concept is actually known as a super tweet. One of the people who started that conversation, Robert Scoble, actually a friend of mine, he and I have had some very extensive conversations about the super tweet, and if you follow his blog, it'll reference over to my blog about conversations we've had in the past. It's complicated. It's a back-end API that provides the mechanism for providing and aggregating all of this information, a database that takes 140 characters and a limitation at that level and allows unlimited information to be associated with that. And then the ability to then aggregate that into unique interfaces, whether they are for branded aspects or for recommendation, whether it be an ad model or sponsorship or straight branding components. There's some very interesting aspects of that. And if anyone's really interested in this project, there's a lot of stuff that you can read about. There's been a lot of research done. There's a lot of stuff that me and my company have done on all this. It is something that I think has a lot of interest, certainly from our end, and interesting project. It's a bit technical. It also is sexy, so you have both ends of that. In that, for this project, you need people familiar with mobile, familiar with APIs of the status and the social media components, and also really super sexy interfaces and user experiences. So it's an interesting model from that end.
But a use case?
I'm sorry?
Use case?
A use case? Well, so if I run this through the system and I post a status message and I say, and I'll use Robert Scoble's example, I'm interested in, I'm going to see Avatar over at, Embarcadero, and that's what I post. And it runs through this system. What happens is, as that post follows through the Twitter sphere and goes on down to Facebook, and people are responding, what happens is the context of that message by itself gets lost. It's just a single 140 character message. But by integrating it into a larger mechanism, then we maintain the thread of when it was created, where it went, who responded, who retweeted it, and then, oh, by the way, we also know it's about a movie, we know it's about a location, and we can now associate all kinds of information for that. So it provides a very, very large way of consolidating what seems to be single 140 character messages. So that's one project.
Who consumes it? Like,
I'm sorry?
Who uses that information?
Well, who uses it, you end up with a lot of information. Just like when you look at, at Bitly and then you go look at the Bitly stats, imagine that on steroids, but not just technical stuff, but also stuff about, relevant. I'm going to you know, the Avatar and Embarcadero. Well, again, this is all real-time contextual data, so we can do all sorts of stuff like, again, know other people that have seen the movie, they might respond, and providing an aggregated service, having the ability to provide ads and sponsorships associated with that, additional recommendations, other location components. So the real component from my end is to make sure that we have this API and backend interface that then plugs into that front end that allows this these messages to be tracked and other information associated with it across multiple services. So, okay, so that's the.
Are you going to do a second one?
I am.